Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, where we talk about the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I am John Negroni, film section editor for theyoungfolks.com. I also write about films and TV shows for publications like Inverse, TV Line, The School, and of course, Cinemaholics. From Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he is a freelance writer. You've seen his work everywhere from Slant Magazine to Cinema Blend to Playlist and more. It's Will Ashton. Hey, Will.
Hello.
You can find more episodes of Cinemaholics, including our full archive on cinemaholics.com, including written reviews, video reviews, and other bonus content. Also, our merch. Cinemaholics merch is on our website. Get yourself a hoodie, mug, t-shirt, shot glass, whatever you like. And of course, if you're like, okay, I want to get some merch. Maybe you already bought the hoodie, the t-shirt, and everything else. If you're like, I want to support Cinemaholics on a more consistent basis. Well, you can go to our Patreon. Patreon.com/Cinemaholics. And if you're like, whoa, look, the holidays just happened, I'm strapped for cash. That's cool. No worries at all. You could always help us out by leaving us a rating on Apple Podcasts. Always helps when you let us know what you like about the show, what you think could be better, and all that good stuff. Mm-hmm. We got a few ratings over the holidays, and we clearly ruffled some feathers. Did we? Yeah, we did. Our average rating went down a little bit, but what are you going to do? So if you can help us out, I get it. People are having a go of it, and apparently we made some enemies, but it's not the first time.
Sure. I was going to ask, do you think anyone got some Cinemaholics merch in their Christmas collections this year? Like they got some hoodies and t-shirts and shot glasses under the Christmas tree this year?
I assume so, because we had some sales, and it was like, right after Black Friday, we got some sales in the lead ups to Christmas. There was we had a promotion going on, so like I think so. I know I haven't been told. Nobody's been like, hey, like you made my daughter's Christmas. She only wanted one thing this year.
She wanted Tickle Me Elmo, but I gave her the Cinemaholics hoodie, and she lit up like the Christmas tree in front of her. So yeah. She I thought you were going to say she lit the Christmas tree on fire out of anger. I mean, that'd be a fair. I mean, if you gave
understandable reaction.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, anyway, this week we were talking about a few films that we've been excited to talk about. Now, The Tragedy of Macbeth is our big review this week. I think this is I'm kind of gearing up. I've got my boxing gloves on. I think we're going to have quite a conversation about that new film, directed by Joel Coen and starring Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand. Later in the show, we'll talk about Sing 2. Who made Sing 2 again, Will Ashton? Somebody I think you like a lot.
Garth Jennings.
Jennings.
Returning to write and direct. He also wrote and directed the first film.
That's right. And then we'll finish the show with a review of The Lost Daughter, which has been in limited release for a little bit, but it's now on Netflix. So you might have already had a chance to see it. And if so, either way, you can hear us talk about The Lost Daughter, which stars Olivia Colman and was directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal. Also stars, of course, Jessie Buckley and Dakota Johnson and Ed Harris. For now, though, I do want to say, we usually wait till the end of the show to bring this up, but I just want to tease real quick that we are going to be doing our top films of the year episode. I think 99% sure it's going to be next week. We're going to do that. It's going to be our top 10s between Will and myself, which we do every year. But I think it's going to be a little different this year. Usually we do it with a special guest. We don't have a special guest lined up. I think it's just going to be you and me.
Just the two of us.
Yeah, we can make it if we try. I think that we have plenty of. It's the thing is, it's going to be a very high quality year, I think, in terms of movies. And so if we had a special person on, I'm worried that it would be a 3-hour episode again. So I don't want that to happen. But with just the two of us, I think we can get this taken care of, and should be a great episode.
Cool.
All right. Well, then, without further ado, let's talk about The Tragedy of Macbeth.
Pricking of my thumbs. Something wicked this way comes.
So as I already mentioned at the top of the show, Tragedy of Macbeth. Now, this is the first time one of the Coen brothers is directing without the other. So Joel Coen directs this film without his brother.
I was wondering about that because Joel Coen was solely credited as a director on at least half their films, like going back to Blood Simple. I think the only time they're both credited, the first time they were both credited was Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? But I wasn't 100%. I'm assuming Ethan was just uncredited throughout all those, but I wasn't 100% sure if he just.
That's always been my assumption.
Yeah,
because,
that's what I thought as well.
It's not like he wasn't there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, obviously they wrote those other films together, so it's to be assumed that Ethan, was also, directing and helping to edit as well. But yeah, I didn't want to say with certainty because I didn't want someone in the comments being like, actually, Joel directed Hudsucker Proxy by himself. And
well, it's kind of like you say. I mean, there are a lot of rules and regulations that go into the DGA, that go into who gets credit for certain things. And I think there's a reason why, the Coen brothers, like, that's a thing. And so, yeah, that's been my understanding, is that they've made these films together. And so, like, yeah, you can be pedantic, you can be semantic about it. But yeah, I think by all intents and purposes, really, this is the first time Joel Coen's kind of striking out and doing his own thing here. And I don't think there's no bad blood or anything between the brothers. I think they just had a conflict of projects, and here we are.
Is that it? I've heard different things. The thing I heard is that Ethan is, I guess, more interested in writing plays right now, and I guess he's kind of just not really had the interest to continue directing.
Yeah, he just it's not like a growing apart thing even. It's just sort of like, yeah, this is what they're interested in right now. That's my understanding, and I think that's perfectly understandable. But
it's interesting that, last week our main review was The Matrix Resurrections, which was Lana Wachowski exclusive. Lily is not involved in that film. She's not directing anymore, it seems. And before that, we had Peter Farrelly directing without Bobby Farrelly, with Green Book. And so it's just kind of like these weird it seems like there's a divide with these sibling filmmakers right now.
I wouldn't even call it a divide. I think that, like, yeah, I mean, you do something with a creative partner long enough, you sort of like reach the end of it, and it's natural. And it's not even a natural conclusion. I could see these guys teaming back up together at some point.
Hopefully.
And I just looked it up, and it's kind of like I said, and like you said too. So up until 2003, Joel received sole credit for directing, and Ethan did get credit for producing, but that was because of guild rules. Back then,
that's what I figured. Yeah.
You weren't allowed to have multiple director credits unless you were like an established duo. And so that's kind of what changed. So after 2003, they were able to like establish themselves with a duo. And then he started getting, that's always been my understanding, is that it's not that he didn't direct, it's that he just didn't get credit. But of course we weren't there. We can't say with 100% certainty, but yeah, I think that is the pretty fair understanding of what happened.
Okay. So what was the first one they got credited together? I thought it was Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, but that would be like 2000. So you're saying it was 2003 when that
Yeah,
rule
so I
changed?
guess it would be, I think that the movie that year was Intolerable Cruelty, right?
Was it Intolerable Cruelty? Okay. That's one of the few of theirs I haven't seen.
Well, before that, we had The Man Who Wasn't There, right? 2001. And I think they do get credit now. That's the thing, is I don't know how these things work retroactively, right? Like, I don't know if they went back and were like, well, hey, can we make it so that this credit goes to this person?
Right.
And it's hard to say. I don't think we need to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's very pedantic things I'm sure 85% of our listeners could care less about, but it interests me.
Like, yeah, I like both these guys, whatever. Yeah. Let's talk about the Tragedy of Macbeth, the film that Joel Coen did by himself this time, and with his wife, Frances McDormand, who stars in the film and also produces. And as I mentioned before, Denzel Washington is the star. He stars as Macbeth. This is a black and white film. It's A24. It is also coming out through Apple TV Plus. It's in limited release right now. January 14th is when you'll be able to catch it on streaming via Apple TV Plus. And this thing is getting critical just acclaim. People love this movie. The Rotten Tomatoes, like we'll play the Rotten Tomatoes game later, but I think I don't think it's spoiling anything or helping you out too much to let you know critics are into this one. And the weird thing though is that not every critic's into this. Did you know, Will Ashton? There are a couple critics, maybe even just one, who are Tragedy of Macbeth. What's the opposite word of apologist?
Sure. I mean, there have been a few naysayers, I guess you could say. Yeah. I know from your Letterboxd reaction that you are less than favorable on the film, and I think. I'm one of the detractors for this film. Yes,
Yikes.
And so
we might have a problem.
Yeah. When I saw the initial early reviews, I was like, okay, good. it's probably going to be good. Yes, yes, yes. And then I saw your negative review. It's like, okay, it's probably going to be really good. Okay, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, so this is a retelling of the Shakespearean tragedy, really one of the most definitive Shakespearean tragedies. We've gotten a Macbeth movie. We've done so many of these before. I think the most recent one was probably like more straightforward adaptation was probably Kenneth Branagh's. I know we had Lady Macbeth starring Florence Pugh, but that was more of like a spiritual sort of like not a retelling. Yeah. It was sort of just like its own sort of, I don't know, do we have a word? Do we have a vocabulary for what kind of movie Lady Macbeth is? Because it's not the story of Macbeth, but it is taking the archetype of that character and putting her into a new story. It's almost like a Macbeth anthology.
It's a reboot. Just kidding. Reboot? No, I'm kidding. I'm trying to remember. I mean, there's been several adaptations. I know there was the Michael Fassbender one that he did with I can't remember that guy's name.
I forgot about that one with
True
Marion
History of the Kelly Gang. Yeah. That one, I think that was maybe not the most recent one, but one of the more recent adaptations.
Well, definitely like a bigger deal. I totally forgot about it, but I guess it was like people cared about it. Justin Kurzel was the director of that one, and Sean Harris was in that. Also Jack Rayner and Elizabeth Debicki. I never saw Macbeth, though. That's a 2015 film. I just skipped it. I had no interest. I remember like when Michael Fassbender kept coming out with like this, and then he did Assassin's Creed, and he just kept like doing these movies like that nobody cared about. They would come out around like December or something, and they'd be him being like a famous character, and people would be like, whatever, we like you and your Magneto. That was basically the...
Sure. Well, I mean, I think the three most famous ones are the Orson Welles film, the Roman Polanski one, and then there's Throne of Blood, which some people may or may not know, the Kurosawa film, which is also an adaptation of Macbeth. I think those are probably the three most well-known or most famous film adaptations of the text.
You don't think Branagh's is?
I feel like Branagh's more known for like his other Shakespeare adaptations, like
like Hamlet. But I don't know. I would say that his. I feel like a lot of people haven't seen Throne of Blood. That's my only
you don't
consternation
think so?
there. I mean, I think a lot of people know Polanski and Wells, but I mean, it's a different era.
I guess, yeah. I mean, certainly it's been a long time since any of those films have come out. But yeah, I mean, I feel like. I remember like when I read Macbeth in high school, like they showed us clips from the Orson Welles one. I remember seeing clips from the Polanski one, and I remember seeing, I think at least something from the Kurosawa Throne of Blood. Just kind of being like, they're not all stuffy white guys. Like, here, check this one out. And it's like, and also, there's just a bunch of other films that, like you say, have taken from the text quite liberally. But
I think we're overlooking one of the most definitive Macbeth portrayals and retellings ever. And that is, of course, Gargoyles, the Disney animated show from the 1990s. And I say that unironically. Like, Gargoyles had an awesome Macbeth like tie-in. Like the way they handled that story and they worked him into this like mythological lore. It's pretty excellent. But yeah, that said, this new adaptation is very different from other ones we've gotten before, but in some ways it really is striking at the heart of what Macbeth has really been about for the longest time. It's a lean film for sure. It's just 105 minutes. And it really is like just taking the dialogue, taking the set pieces and the minimalist playwright sort of stage production aspect of the play and, transposing it into a black and white film with, like I said, like very minimal sets, very ethereal, very surreal kind of atmosphere. If you don't know the story of Macbeth, it's very simple. You have this guy named Macbeth. He is, I think, the Thane of a Scottish kingdom or something like the Thane of Cawdor, I think it is, but I don't want to misspeak. And he gets a premonition from these witches that tell him, like, you got to be king. You got to be king, but to do so, you have to take down the existing king. And in this case, that king is played by Brendan Gleeson. The witches are played by Catherine Hunter. And if he carries this out, what will it do to his soul, and so on and so on. And then, of course, Lady Macbeth is also an influence on him making a decision to possibly pull on a coup. And so that's the story here. Now, I already said I'm a bit of a detractor, but I'm going to say on the positives, this film's cinematography is absolutely brilliant. I mean, you watch this movie, it's you're drinking in just like crisp, unbelievably sharp filmmaking to the level that I think that it beggars belief. Like I cannot believe some of the shots that they pulled off here.
Bruno.
I really dig the whole production design, all the aesthetics. It's just full on great across the board for me.
Yeah. Bruno Debonel, who I believe has been the cinematographer for the last couple Coen Brothers films, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure he shot Inside Llewyn Davis, right?
Inside Llewyn Davis back in 2013.
Well, he didn't do Hail Caesar because that was Roger Deakins, I think. But he did. Did he do Ballad of Buster Scruggs?
He did Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
Okay.
Yeah, about to say, did Ballad of Buster Scruggs. His last one was Woman in the Window. So we mentioned him on the show before, I think. Also did Darkest Hour, Miss Peregrine's, what was that called? Miss Peregrine's House for Kids? Or
Home for Peculiar Children.
Home for Peculiar Children. But yeah, Inside Llewyn Davis. I don't think he's done any other films with the Coen brothers. I think it was just Ballad of Buster Scruggs and... yeah, I think that's it. Maybe I think actually no. I think they did a segment with him once for that anthology film back in 2006.
Paris or whatever.
Yeah, that's the name of it. Yeah, because they did a segment. I think he shot that too, if I'm not mistaken. So.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, but yeah, really great cinematographer. I don't love all of the films that he shot, for sure. But he did Across the Universe. I knew there was one that I was like, okay. This is a choice of the cinematography that I personally jive with.
I mean, not a movie I love, but it looks very nice.
Yeah, well, that's kind of describes how I feel about the Tragedy of Macbeth.
Sure.
But okay, Will, what do you think of the Tragedy of Macbeth? It sounds like you're about to gush over this thing.
Sure. Well, before I forget, I want to clarify. I looked it up to be sure. Kenneth Branagh didn't direct the Macbeth adaptation. He started.
He didn't direct it?
No.
Really?
Are you talking about the 2013 one that he did for like national? What do you call it? National theater. Unless he directed the like stage adaptation and just not like the film version of it.
I might be conflating things then. I guess because I know he directed something. Was it a play and not the movie?
I guess he co-directed the stage production, but I guess like the film version that went to theaters for Fathom Events, he didn't. I don't know. It's confusing. Anyway,
it's possible that I'm conflating just because it's Kenneth Branagh, and to me, he did all the main Shakespearean.
I mean, he did like Henry V and Hamlet and like Much Ado About Nothing, a bunch of other Shakespeare adaptations. He is a Shakespeare dude.
Huh.
So yeah, just want to clarify that in case anyone is any like Shakespearean thespian is getting mad at us. But to answer your initial question, as far as my anticipation for Tragedy of Macbeth, I was very, very hyped for it because, as many people probably know by now, I'm a huge fan of the Coen brothers. They are my second favorite filmmakers behind Paul Thomas Anderson. So it's been
what a couple of weeks this has been for you.
A week, yeah, because I saw Licorice Pizza last Monday, and I saw this on Sunday, so it was quite a big week for me.
Did you see this in IMAX or you see it in a standard?
If I could have seen it in IMAX, I would have, but I just saw it in theaters. I saw it actually at a lovely little indie theater that I'd never been to before here, and it was fun to see it with a bunch of old people that were really into the text. Straggler teenagers that aren't paying attention. Everyone was geared and locked into it. But as also, I'm by no means a Shakespeare expert or a like super fan or anything, but Macbeth is my favorite of his texts. I think it's just, a great piece of work. I think that's fair to say.
That's interesting because I think that describes a lot of the differences between you and me because I'm a Hamlet guy through and through.
Okay. I'm not as familiar with Hamlet, to be honest.
Have you seen The Lion King?
Sure.
Everybody's familiar with Hamlet.
No, but I never studied Hamlet.
I gotcha.
I studied Macbeth.
Not even in school.
You never got around to that one. Maybe I just missed that class. But I did study Macbeth. I studied Romeo and Juliet, one or two others from the Shakespeare archive. But it was a bunch of things I love, a lot of great flavors coming together for me at least. So but obviously as a fan of the brothers collectively, I was very curious to know like, okay, now Joel's going to be officially on his own here. What exactly are we going to get? And certainly I feel like this movie is a lot more dry than their other films, which is saying something. I feel like there's a little bit more of a kind of almost like pseudo-serious sort of tone here, where it seems like they're almost afraid at times to tell jokes. It is a funny film in spurts, but I feel like compared to something like The Big Lebowski or any number of their other films, it's probably the most serious film he has done since No Country for Old Men, which is also very not a very lighthearted film. But yeah, I mean, for me, I guess going into this film, I wasn't exactly sure what the tone was going to be, but I could just tell from the trailers and everything else that it was going to be very reverent, but also taking a sort of both minimalist and maximalist approach, because obviously, like we said, like the text was being condensed into a 105-minute runtime, kind of stripping away some of the exteriors and focusing more directly on our two Macbeths and their kind of fragile state of mind, but also like, the sets are very minimalist, but like the use of shadowing, the coloring of it, obviously being black and white, there's a lot of stark visuals to it. And I think personally it really works. It's not a film that I love as much as I love the previous collaborations between the Coen brothers, but at the same time, I think it's a really rock solid adaptation of the film. And I guess I'll hopefully explain more why, but I'm more curious to learn why you didn't like it. I can assume, but I don't want to know for sure.
Well, sure. I do want to bounce off of what you said there. I think the reason the cinematography works so well for me here, and including the production design, is because it's just so precise. I mean, there is like, it's part of the story. Like the way that like you have these empty rooms kind of matching like the empty souls of the people inside them. I mean, when you watch this movie, you feel something to that respect. So for me, if it all came down to that, like if it really was a matter of like how this film is presented, I'd be like, yeah, this is one of the best movies of the year. But I mean, I think as a lot of our listeners have probably learned about me at this point, I put a lot of weight into the emotional stakes of a story and, the basic fundamentals of characterization and how do you get invested in characters. And I've kind of like looked into like some of the reviews of this, and some of the people who haven't liked it, who are sort of some people that, not even like critics, but just like audiences are like, honestly, like I wanted to like this, but I had no idea what these people were saying. Like they were confused because it's Shakespearean dialogue, which is very alienating to, modern, moviegoers. So if you haven't really studied Shakespeare, there can be a little bit of a barrier to entry, right? You kind of have to like really pay attention to this movie. I've heard some people be like, well, I didn't understand what people were saying, but that's fine. I could pick up on like the gist from context clues, which I think is valid. Like, I don't think this is a complicated enough story to that, where it's like, yeah, you kind of get what's going on just by like the movements and the expressions. And, I certainly didn't understand everything people were saying. I was like, what are you talking about? I don't know. But to me, it's less of a problem of the what. It's more of the why that feels like it's missing for me in this movie. You. Like, why does Macbeth want to be king? I think.
Okay. I thought you meant like why Joel Coen wanted to tell this story. I thought that's what you were leading.
Well, I think that's pretty obvious. I think that Joel Coen like loves the production of it. I think that he loves the idea of just like taking this tragedy and dialing it up to 20. But when it comes to the character of Macbeth, I just don't think there's as much work being put into what makes this a compelling, tragic figure. Because I think that when I'm watching Denzel Washington deliver this performance, I really don't get a sense of like, why does he want power? And I think it made way more sense in Shakespeare's time, this story, because back then, of course, people wanted the power of being a king. It's this, they live in a world that's hierarchical. And at that time, it was subversive to be like, no, the monarchy is terrible. Like if to get there, you have to do things that rob your soul. And I think that this movie just doesn't quite deliver that message as well. Like I just did not get that from this movie of like, the tragedy of royalty. If anything, it was just like, royalty is great, but you got to get it the right way, I guess is what this film is kind of going after. And so I just think that it's not just the dialogue that's kind of alienating. I think it's like, this film is kind of taking the most archaic aspects of the story and just not updating them in a way that's societally, relevant to people watching this. And so you can kind of watch this as a curiosity. I don't think that this is a worthless film or anything like that. But I do think that it's hard to just sort of connect to what's happening and to sort of like really land your heart with this movie. At least for me. I mean, it sounds like other people are able to do that, I guess. I don't know what it is. Like, I don't know if are people really having a heart with this story, or are they just kind of like, they're loving the trappings and they're just sort of like, sure, the story's not, my favorite aspect, but all this other stuff is so great. Who cares?
Well, I mean, I have heard people say that they find it to be a little bit too austere, I guess. Like it's a little bit too beholden to, like you were saying, like the the properness of the text that it can almost feel a little bit stuffy, I guess, which I don't fully agree with, but I can at least understand that. Like, it's especially for people our age, I feel like it's kind of a hard sell to be like, it's Shakespeare again, but I guess for me, what I find appealing about Joel Coen's adaptation is that it does feel a little bit more elemental, I guess, like you're saying. Like it does feel kind of like you're kind of going back to the basics almost. Like there's a starkness to just how reserved and kind of strict back it is in terms of the performances and the characterizations, in contrast with some of the more kind of looming sets and kind of the great shadowing and the lighting and as we mentioned, the cinematography from Bruno Dumont. But what I also really like about this film is that it kind of feels like it's grabbing from several other adaptations that we've gotten. We get like kind of like the mythicism of Throne of Blood, but we also kind of get that expressionist style that we get from Orson Welles' previous adaptation. And we also are getting kind of the more kind of like looming foreboding that we see in some of the more like something we get from Polanski's adaptation. And I mean, I'm by no means an expert in all these film adaptations, but it does kind of feel like we are getting like kind of like the old fashioned filmmaking techniques from their style, but we're also kind of getting like this new fresh coat of paint from like the stylistic choices that we get from your typical A24 film. And I can see those being off-putting to some people, but I thought the balance of those two things made it pretty interesting. As far as, I guess, like what you're trying to say, like justifying itself by doing this adaptation again or exploring this text once more.
I have to be honest. I didn't walk away from this movie being like, yeah, this had to have been, this is A24. I could see Joel Coen's fingerprints on this, but I don't know. To me, when I think of A24 movies, I think of movies with so much heart and soul that it's undeniable. I think of Last Black Man in San Francisco and Eighth Grade and, all these films that just have like, just their heart on their sleeves, films that came out this year, like Come On, also in black and white. But, I, when I'm looking at Shakespearean adaptations in general, I think the ones that I personally like the most are ones that like I said before, they update the play, knowing that audiences, it's going to be too jarring if you do it, if you don't take the contemporary audience in mind. I think one of my favorite, like we already mentioned Lady Macbeth, which I think is brilliant about this. I know Midsummer is not a Shakespearean retelling, but I just thought of another A24 movie that again, like is able to have that kind of bleak tragedy, but it does it in such an interesting way. It does it in such a surprising way where you're watching the whole movie and it's like all this, all the horrific stuff is happening in broad daylight. Like, I don't know, stuff like that. That's what makes me stand up and pay attention. And at no point in this movie was like, wow, I've never even like contextualized anything like this before. But even in other, Much Ado About Nothing, 2012. Wonderful black and white film. I know Joss Whedon, all that stuff, but
I like that movie fine, but I feel like that the issues that you're presenting, I felt more with that film.
What do you mean?
The Joss Whedon one you're talking about?
I think that movie's magic. I think the 2012 one.
See, I don't really remember that one that well. I just kind of like, okay, that was nifty, I guess. Like, it's cool.
Well, it has the dialogue, right? But it's also contemporary, and I think that's what makes it so fun. Like, I don't know, it's doing something. It's hard to explain.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, I guess for me, when I don't really look back on that movie that much because I just see it as kind of like it's nifty that they were able to pull that off. Like while he's finishing up Avengers and he like got his friends and they did it. I think
nifty is underselling it.
I don't know. I feel like nifty is pretty fitting. Like I don't know. I just don't remember like being like, oh, this is like the ultimate telling of this text.
It sounds like you think I'm making Much Ado About Nothing.
I guess, but I mean, for me though, it feels like this movie is kind of going like when you're asking like it feels cold and it feels like it's going for that. I feel like for one, that's sort of the point, which I can, if that's not your thing, I can respect that. But I also kind of like that this kind of going for like a Hammer horror approach to it. Like it kind of feels like we're kind of getting this like very heightened stylized telling that obviously we've seen other stylized versions of this text, but it does feel like it's borrowing a lot of like the things that we've seen. I know like they've been doing this production of the stage show of late. I think like Saoirse Ronan is doing in London right now. So I don't know if it's just like an outright new version of Macbeth that he is adapting or if they're just taking it from this film. But it does seem like there is, like I said, like this kind of like cold, like you say, like kind of like elemental aspect to it, but it's bringing out the brutality of the text. Like it almost makes the text feel a little bit more cutting because of the futility of it. Like the idea that like what the Macbeths are really pursuing is ultimately fairly meaningless and short-sighted, because like even though they'll extend in power, it's not really what Macbeth would ultimately want, and like he's just ruining his life, which is very true, I feel like, to most Coen brothers films. Like the idea that like a great deal of these Coen brothers films are just like these like dumb idiots who are just like getting in over their head by doing poor attempts at criminality. It's almost like kind of doing that, and then like recognizing that like Shakespeare in a way is sort of like a tale like that almost, except obviously these characters are a lot smarter than your average Coen brothers protagonists.
Here's the thing with that though. Those movies tend to have a really good juxtaposition, and they are so much better at getting me to root for those bumbling criminal characters, like you're saying. And I think part of that is because in Fargo you have Frances McDormand. In this movie, what do we have? Like, we just have a lot of characters I don't care about and I don't like. Like Corey Hawkins is playing this guy Macduff, right? And I just think that like his whole role in the story is just like very uninteresting, to the point when there are like certain fights in this movie, I don't feel anything. Like there is one fight in this movie that I think is brilliant.
I disagree. Okay, yeah, you're talking about the ending fight is what I'm assuming you're referring to.
The penultimate fight where, Macbeth is fighting somebody unarmed. That was the only time in this movie where I felt something, where I was kind of like, wow, I actually now am starting to feel what the character is feeling, because before that I'm not. And I think that like it's great for a movie to be cold. I like cold movies, but make them chilly. But in order for me to enjoy a movie like that, I still need to want something for the character. In this movie, I just don't have that at all. And I think that has been an issue in some other Coen brothers films. I think that they haven't always nailed, that likability in their approach to how a character comes across. And like, we were just talking about Red Rocket, which is a good example of like, that is not a character you really root for, but it is a character that you're with and you're able to sort of see like everything kind of fall apart from him in a compelling way. In this movie, it's just, I see everything falling apart, and I like, what is there for me to grab onto? Is it the relationship with his wife? I think that he and Frances McDormand, I don't know, like whenever they were talking to each other, I didn't buy it. I didn't buy Frances McDormand in this movie in general.
Guess that's where... Okay, I really like Frances McDormand.
I did not like her in this movie. I thought that she was very, very I just didn't think she did the part very well. I don't know.
I have heard people complain about her performance, but one of the things I find most fascinating about this adaptation is that obviously like Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand are a little bit older than your typical actors playing this part. Like normally get somebody in like kind of like their 30s or maybe like their 40s. Now we're getting people, I believe both Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand are probably like 50s or 60s at this point.
Yeah, that is another thing too. It's like if you're going to have older characters in this role, you need to do something to the story again, because like
that's why I think
the original play is like, like it's about the youth and the ambition of like people who are young and want it all too quickly. But then when you do that with somebody in their 50s, you kind of have to update and be like, okay, maybe it's more of like this is your last chance. This is a story of desperation. I just didn't think that came across.
Okay, and then I guess that's where we ultimately disagree. I think the fact they're older kind of showcases that futility, like the idea that like what they're pursuing here is just like not really in their best interest. Like they're not really thinking through what they're ultimately doing here, which feels very Coen-esque to me. Like the idea that these like kind of salt in their ways characters are, getting in over their heads by trying to do something that they think will pursue their best interest, but ultimately just damns them, which is I think very true to my favorite Coen brothers films. But I get like what you're saying. I feel like there is something to their previous or the collaborations I did with his brother, with Ethan, where like there is kind of like those undercutting moments of unsuspecting sweetness, or like there's some more humanity in place where it kind of balances out the coldness, or it makes them stand out a little bit more. If I had one major complaint about the film, it does feel like each scene could use maybe like a little bit more tonal distinction. The fact that each scene kind of feels of peace with each other, I can see people respecting that, but it does make the scenes, I guess, stand out a little bit less for me, especially in the middle, because like they all kind of have the same foreboding tone throughout. But at the same time, like I said, it feels like that kind of Hammer horror movie approach that he's going for, where there is like these like looming shadows and like this grave sense that Macbeth is just going to ultimately damn himself because he just can't really listen to his best instincts, and he pursues this for the wrong reasons because his wife basically tells him to. And
all that and the age thing I think are creative, but also to me, in my opinion, overly charitable interpretations where like I don't see that in the text. Now that said, I have only seen it once. You've only seen it once. Who knows?
Right.
Like it could be one of those things where we could watch it and be like, you know what? Well, you had a point here, John. You had a point. Who knows? You can't be closed-minded.
It's not a film. I mean, I've been thinking about it since I've seen it, and it's not a film that, while I respect it a lot, I don't love it as much as I love a lot of their past films. Like, I think the Coen brothers are, toe for toe, like some of our, most consistently great filmmakers. Obviously, they have a couple clunkers, but like for the most part, their films are not only really good, but they get better the more you watch them. Like you appreciate more. There's more to appreciate with time with them. And I don't know if that's going to be the case here. I mean, obviously, I've only just seen it the one time, so it's going to be one of those things where it's like, maybe I'll look back on this film a few years later and be like, oh, I totally stole it a little bit too much. Like maybe I just like kind of let my appreciation for this filmmaker kind of overshadow some of the flaws that it has. But I mean, I think it does really work on its own terms. Like I said, I don't think it's like whether it's not like a masterpiece or anything like that. I don't think, but
people are calling it a masterpiece, and I'm just sort of being like, okay, sure.
But I do. I mean, I think I just really appreciate how it can be so grand, but also have that characteristic understatement of a lot of the great Coen brothers performances. I think that's what I really admire, is that like when we get the like kind of classic Denzel Washington shouting moments, as you would expect from him playing Macbeth, they feel more earned to me because he underplayed it throughout so much of the film. And I feel like that's something that's very typical of Joel Coen, and I guess also Ethan Coen when they work together. I don't know, just there's a lot of stuff here I like a lot. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, I'll say, I just want to make sure people manage their expectations, and like hopefully this one exceeds them for them. But yeah, I mean, when I'm looking at my favorite Coen brothers movies and really the movies that have been the most successful for them in the long term, I'm thinking of Fargo, of course, and Big Lebowski, like really pop culturally relevant movies. I think No Country for Old Men kind of represents like one of their highs, like one of their highest highs. I know also there is also True Grit.
Great film.
And I always like Hail Caesar. I really hold in high esteem. I think that's a movie that just did not get its due.
Yeah, I need to revisit that. I liked it. I didn't love it compared to some other Coen. Same with True Grit. But I mean, for me, like Inside Llewyn Davis.
First watch. Yeah, Hail Caesar was my kind of thing.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I mean, for me, of this past decade, Inside Llewyn Davis, I think, is magnificent. I really like that movie a lot. Going back a little bit further, I think, like you said, No Country for Old Men, A Serious Man, I think, is maybe in their top 5 best films ever.
I can see that. Yeah, very great. That's 2009, I want to say.
Yeah, and I think I would love to watch A Serious Man and then follow it up with Tragedy of Macbeth. I think they'd be very interesting companion pieces. But
yeah, wonderful Michael Stuhlbarg film. I want to say.
Oh yeah, he's great in it. Yeah, but yeah, I mean,
one of our most underutilized actors, in my opinion.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, when I think back on like, there are moments where I kind of feel like Joel Coen, like he had opportunities to be a little bit funnier with this film. And I think it does have a kind of really dry sense of humor, but for the most part, it is playing it pretty serious. But there are moments like with Stephen Root's character where it's just like, oh, okay, yeah, this is like kind of like what I expected when I hear like the Coen brothers are doing a Shakespeare adaptation. And then he also only has like that one scene. And it's like, that's a shame. Like they had the opportunity to kind of push him a little bit more in the film. And I think that might have leveled out some of your complaints.
No, I don't know, because I think I liked this movie best when it didn't feel like a Coen brothers movie, when I thought that it was starting to settle more into like a new kind of approach for this filmmaker. Like this is what Joel can do on his own. And I kind of actually liked that, the sort of like the operatic style. Like my favorite stuff in this movie are some of the scenes just being like mesmerizing. Like when the throne room turns into a forest, when like a pool of water starts to bubble up.
Yeah, that's great.
Like stuff like that. I'm just like, that's not typical Coen brothers to me. I mean, not something I initially think of. And that was the stuff that I was most interested in. But yeah, in terms of like their, the signature styles, like I wasn't missing that in this movie personally.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
I did like Harry Melling in this, by the way. Harry Melling, glad to see him come back after Scruggs, Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and also Ralph Ineson. I was delighted by in this.
Yeah, I mean, the cast, all together. I mean, I think the MVP is probably Catherine Hunter, who plays our 3 witches.
Absolutely.
She's fantastic in this. She's so good.
I think it's almost to the detriment of Frances McDormand. I think she embodies that character so well for me that when I see Frances McDormand like wandering the castle, just kind of with the same expression on her face the whole time, I'm just like, man, Catherine Hunter is outclassing you right now.
Sure. Where'd you? You haven't talked about how you feel about Denzel Washington. I was curious where you.
I think Denzel's good, but not great in this. I think that the range just isn't there. I think he's playing it on like one or two notes, and I don't think it's his fault. I just think that he's not given much range to really work with. I think that he's always a bit on the same note, and I think that, like I said before, that one scene is like where I think he comes out as like that brooding, boiling like anger underneath is finally connecting with the actual performance in that unarmed fight. But I just didn't catch that anywhere else in this movie. I just felt like he was way too reactive. I mean, Macbeth has always got to be a little bit reactive of a character, honestly.
Sure.
But in this movie, I think that they just didn't quite get that balance right for me.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I enjoy his performance a good bit. The other thing I just want to talk about before I forget is I really like the sound design in this movie. Yeah. Just like the way that, I mean, it's obviously filmed on a soundstage, but just the way that it kind of captures that like play feel where there's like kind of like the dripping water and like this kind of like slamming in the background. And you just like kind of like, it's really effective, but also fairly understated as far as like getting you into the troubled mindset of our title character. So yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of stuff here I like. I mean, do I think it all comes together as well as some of their past films? Not exactly, but I also think it's a little bit better than you're giving it credit ultimately.
Well, I'll finish out with saying I do think the costumes are good in this, and I do think Carter Burwell's score is solid and a longtime Coen Brothers collaborator.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I have nothing major to complain about at all when it comes to the aesthetics and how this movie comes across. I just, like I said before, like I hope people manage their expectations. I think for most people, this is the kind of movie at the very least you're going to get something very sumptuous, but I just hope people aren't going in expecting like a grand slam of a movie because it might not be that for you. Hopefully it will, because that's obviously preferable, but yeah, just definitely was far from that for me. But okay, that's Tragedy of Macbeth. I guess we can play the Rotten Tomatoes game. Will Ashton, 164 film critics have logged a review for the Tragedy of Macbeth on Rotten Tomatoes. What do you think the Rotten Tomatoes score is at this point?
91%.
Yeah, kind of close. 94%. Okay. I mean, I feel like we knew it was going to be the 90s. I mean, that's what this kind of movie is.
Sure.
Yeah, 94. What about the audience score? We have 100 plus ratings counted.
75%.
75% is your guess. A bit off. It's 86%.
Okay.
So yeah, so far the audiences who are seeking this out are being like, yeah, we're with Will. We're with Will on this one, which that's fine. But yeah, so it started its limited release on Christmas Day. Like I mentioned before, it's going to be streaming on January 14th. We don't have a cinema score, I think, because I don't think this isn't like a wide release, right? So that's not too big of a surprise.
I don't know if did we mention that it's going to be on Apple TV Plus later this month?
Yeah, I just said that. January 14th.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah, so that'll do it for the Tragedy of Macbeth. Yeah, I mean, if you are a cinemaholic, I mean, check this out. This is one of the must-watches if you are a film lover. But if you're a little bit more careful about what you want to watch, you may want to hesitate a little bit just in case.
I mean, look, with Omicron, I don't want to say like you have to go to theaters, all this stuff like that. But if you're going to theaters anyway, it's between this and The King's Man. Yeah, I'd see this one. That's what. Hey,
you didn't see King's Man, so you can't even.
That's true. Well, I've heard it's not very good, but I don't know for sure. That's fair.
Yeah, King's Man, I wasn't a big fan of myself. So, all right, let's move on to our next film here, Sing 2. So we already got the first Sing, which is an Illumination film, which it's hard for me to remember. Like, is it Illumination? Is it DreamWorks? I don't know. But no, this is Illumination. And
what are you talking? This is like very Illumination.
I guess
in ways both bad and good. To be fair,
I feel like both DreamWorks and Illumination over the last few years have been sort of like meeting closer to the middle with their movies, and they're becoming a little bit less indistinguishable than they used to be. That's just my opinion. But
I don't know. I feel like DreamWorks has been, to their credit, I feel like they've been kind of trying to push away from that stigma that they have, where it's like, oh, we're like the B grade team. Like they're doing like some How to Train Your Dragons. They're doing a little bit more to like.
I think that era is long past. They're now in the Wish Dragon kind of. I guess it's Sony, huh?
Well, Boss Baby, I guess it's a big one they have.
There
now,
we go, Boss Baby. That's DreamWorks.
they're kind of in a forgettable age at this moment. Though I saw a trailer for one they have coming up called The Bad Guys.
That actually looks pretty interesting to me.
I mean, I didn't know anything about it going into it, but I didn't realize the style was going to be more like Spider-Verse than I was anticipating. I thought it was just going to be like a generic anime film, but it actually looks like it's like mixing 2D and 3D.
It looks like it has like an interesting visual aesthetic, which is definitely step one.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Not saying it looks good, just like visually this looks much more interesting than I anticipated.
Right. So, we'll see if it's good, like literally, when we do. But in terms of movies that I think it looked good enough. That's how I feel about the first Sing. Like, I don't think the first Sing is like a bad movie or anything like that. I think you liked it better than I did for sure. It's a movie that I didn't watch like when it first came out.
Yeah.
It took me a minute to get to it.
It's a sweet little movie that I think is kind of in that B- C+ area where it's not quite great, and I think it's not even particularly good, but it has such a pure heart. And I think for Illumination, that is pretty rare because I feel like a lot of their other films feel very capitalistic, and it feels like they're kind of chasing the trends.
Yeah, they're trying to be the new Looney Tunes. They're trying to create these like vignettes of like slapstick cartoonish comedy and stringing them together in feature length movies. Yeah, to varying success. I think like you have movies like Minions, which makes like billions of dollars, right? But then other times not so much. I mean, Secret Life of Pets 2 was the follow up to. I know Secret Life of Pets was like people really liked that movie, right? That was I think same year as Sing, or like right before. And the sequel,
whatever. I think the biggest thorn in Sing's side is that it's ultimately just a little too derivative for its own good. And I think it's never quite as clever or as unique as it should be to really stand out. But at the same time, I think it's more sincere than critics and maybe some audiences give it credit.
Whether or not it's being sincere is whatever to me. Like in this case, I don't really care. That's like, it can be sincere. That's fine. I'm fine
here
with
to hear, folks. But John doesn't care about your sincerity.
I don't care about the sincerity of an Illumination film. I'll put it that way, because it's like, that's nice, but like, what about the movie itself? I don't know. But in terms of the first thing, I think it's very watchable. Absolutely. Decent family film. The premise is
some
fun.
Cringy humor, some cringy bits, but otherwise pretty watchable, pretty sweet. Yeah,
it's kind of got the same, not the same, but it's got a similar setup to like Zootopia. Okay, like we got a world full of talking animals, but whereas Zootopia was a very it's very Disney. They spent a ton of time like building that world, making it feel like this is what a world built by animals would actually be. Yeah, this is like you could transpose these characters with humans and it wouldn't be that different. And that's kind of the point. It's just sort of like it's a gimmick to sort of make it more cartoonish and silly.
I mean, yeah, because like the first movie, like there's clearly some thought put into like obviously like the elephant is like shy, but she's like big, so there's like the contradiction there. Like you have Seth MacFarlane's kind of like wise cracking guy, but he's like the little mouse, and then obviously like same.
Who's bizarrely missing from this movie.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there, but like obviously like. It's very literal, but like the koala, Matthew McConaughey's character is like the little guy who's like dreaming big and all that. And it's like, they play with like size a lot and stuff like that, but they don't really play up with the animal aspects of it that much, weirdly.
Right. Well, I'm talking especially about the setting. Zootopia is a timeless setting. You can watch that movie in 10 years and not even know it was made in 2016. Whereas Sing, you're going to be like, oh yeah, that was made, because it's so instantly dated by how contemporary it is. Not that that's a bad thing. I think that, I think the movie, it's a perfectly, respectable approach. You want to make a contemporary talking animal movie, just do it. I don't,
sure.
But I'm just saying that is a limitation that comes with the territory.
I think you're maybe a little bit more favorable on Zootopia than I am, but I get your point. Like, I think there's a lot more thought and thematic depth to Zootopia that's just clearly absent from Sing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not the biggest Zootopia fan. I know some people rave about that movie. And I remember that was the year that I was like, no, Moana. Like, that is the Disney film that really, like, kicks. But people were like, no, Zootopia is about something. And I'm like, is it? Okay. Sure.
I just think it's kind of it's a bit of a confused metaphor, but I appreciate what it's going for and the fact that Disney did that.
I just think the world building of it is like the coolest thing about it.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that.
That's all I'm saying. But yeah, Sing 2 is the sequel, which I got to be honest, I was like, what do you do for the sequel? You know, like after the first one, it's like it's basically like an American Idol voice kind of like singing competition story about, you know, animal characters who aren't, you know, your standard, your stereotypical sort of like performers finding that sort of fame and success. And then going into this movie Singing 2, I was like, well, how do you do that in 2021 when we're firmly in the TikTok era? Like Vine was around back in 2016, but it wasn't, you know, it wasn't really considered a place where people like the everyday person go on to an app and like perform and like do all these things and get discovered. We had things like YouTube, but even then it was still kind of like rarefied. Like we had Bo Burnham and Justin Bieber, I guess, but we didn't have that sort of like influencer culture where somebody could come from nothing and suddenly become like a superstar. Now we have like Billie Eilish, you know what I'm saying? And even then people are like, well, you know, a lot of that stuff is gamified, you know, like if you really look into like TikTok influencers, like a lot of them, it's like planned for them to become famous, whatever. I'm not here to debate that. But I will say with Sing 2, it does go into a bit of an interesting direction. So, you know, we find out, you know, Buster Moon, who's once again voiced by Matthew McConaughey, things are going great with the new theater and everything, but yeah, they have issues like impressing a talent scout, kind of saying like, okay, you want to move to the next level, but you don't have what it takes. And so the singers from the first film are like, well, we gotta do something. We gotta do a Hail Mary, kind of go for broke. They go to this place called Red Shore City, which is kind of like a Las Vegas sort of like hybrid with LA, but mainly Las Vegas, where they're going to try to like muscle their way into, you know, the entertainment biz, like really like create something amazing. And it's not a competition this time. They're going to put on a big performance, like play kind of thing. You kind of were telling me you think that it's like a commentary on Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Is that right?
Well, yeah, you're stealing my thunder a little bit.
I'm sorry, yeah.
I have no idea for sure if that's the case, but the idea that like a kind of small town theater guy hits it big, gets a chance to make a big sci-fi blockbuster. I look at Garth Jennings' filmography, a music video director, TV director that hits it big by getting the chance to direct Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I have no idea, to be clear, if that has any connection to this movie or if it's autobiographical in any sense. I just think it's an interesting parallel. That's my only point with that. Yeah.
My review of Sing 2 is basically the same as the first movie. Perfectly watchable. There's nothing really offensive about this movie. I think that it's going to, you know, age like milk, you know, for a lot of people. They're going to watch it and be like, yeah, that was a nice time. It's kind of like your typical MCU movie in that respect of like, it's going to kind of fleet away pretty quickly, I think. I do appreciate the vocal performances in here. This is one of those few animated movies from like Illumination where I actually think that they put a lot of thought into which celebrities voice who. I think that Reese Witherspoon is one of my favorite things about both of these movies. She voices Rosita, the kind of like housewife pig who wants to, you know, strive for more. I think Scarlett Johansson's not my favorite kind of performance in these movies, but in this one I think that she made a bit more of an impression, mainly because she gets to interact more with a new character voiced by Nick Offerman, who I think is really good in this, actually. Like, I was actually like kind of quite taken a bit by his character, and I was like, oh, this is actually an angle to this sort of story I wasn't expecting, and I'm kind of liking it.
Was it Nick Offerman was in the first one?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not thinking of Nick Offerman. I'm thinking of Bono. Clay Calloway character. Sorry. Not Nick Offerman. Nick Offerman is Rosita's husband. It's because I was just talking about Rosita.
Yeah, I was genuinely confused because, like, unless you just forgot, he is in the first one very briefly, but he is.
Yes. Bono is who I meant to say there, who voices this kind of like this lion character who is sort of like past his prime and dealing with a tragedy. And I was like, oh yeah, they're clearly trying to go for something a bit more emotional here.
Maybe this is a hot take. I haven't talked about this with you, so I don't know. I think Bono is like actually pretty good in this. Like,
that's
I was
what
not
I'm
expecting
saying.
it.
That's what I'm saying right now.
I was surprised. I was just like, okay, you know, like they hired Bono because he's a name or whatever, but he gives like maybe the best performance in the film.
That's what I'm saying. It's just like kind of surprising. I'm like, oh, wow,
right, exactly.
This is like kind of, this has something to it.
Because I heard him like, you know, like Bono's Bono, whatever. But like I heard it's like, oh, I spent time studying lions and all this. Like, whatever. You're playing a lion and Sing 2, like whatever. Yeah. And like he gives like this like emotionally cathartic performance. And it's like, oh, how about that? You know, good for him. did a nice job. Yeah.
I think Halsey is kind of good in this. She plays a new character named Portia, who's the daughter of the kind of the main antagonist of this movie, who's like the wolf character guy, voiced by Bobby Cannavale, who also does well. I just think everybody in this is good. Nick Kroll is still as good as ever as Gunter. I think that Taron Egerton, he doesn't do as much in this movie as Johnny, but I still think
that was weird.
He's all right as well.
Yeah, he's fine in this. It does kind of feel like, well, we can't get rid of him, but we don't really have anything to do with him this time.
His arc is over.
Right.
Not over, but it's just like the most interesting aspect of it is kind of past.
Right. It's very sequely like. It's like kind of like when you're in like season 3 of a show, and it's just like, well, we kind of did everything we wanted to do with you in seasons 1 and 2.
Yeah,
so,
they're still there, but they're not quite. Right. They're contributing. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
And then my favorite character, though, voiced by Garth Jennings, is of course Miss Crawley. Miss Crawley gets all the best laughs. Clearly, the most inspired character.
Favorite.
This movie's Edna Mode. Let's just say it.
Yeah, probably. The highlight of the movie is her rocking out to System of a Down. Great scene.
Very good, very good. When she gets a chance to sort of be the director and is bossing people around, I'm just like, this is the wavelength I want this movie to be at right now.
No, I thought that was a good bit because, like, obviously, like the joke you're thinking of is just like, oh, like she's gonna be clumsy and like let this whole production go, but like, or go to crap. I'm sorry. But yeah, it's obviously like she like becomes like a dictator. I think it's a good joke. Yeah,
it's good. It's good. Yeah. Not every, like I said before, not every vocal performance is quite there for me. I think that Pharrell is in this movie, which I would have guessed that was Pharrell until the credits came up.
Who was he? I saw him in the credits. I know,
right?
Yeah. Who was he? Who did he play?
He plays the elephant who sells ice cream.
Oh, that's him?
Like, you're going to get Pharrell for that role? Does he even sing?
Has there been any discourse about that relationship?
No, I don't think so. Why?
Okay. No, that's a joke.
Tori Kelly voices the character,
right? Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Or reprises the character. And hey, Tori Kelly, that is another person who became a celebrity through YouTube. So there you go. A little bit of full circle there. I know she was on American Idol too, but
she probably gives the best performance in the original film.
Very good in the original. This one I think is okay. Like I don't think the character I cared about the most in this movie was Bono's Lion and also Reese Witherspoon's Rosita, which I don't know. I was kind of clicking with those characters more. I think Matthew McConaughey he's still doing the same thing here. He's not pushing the envelope.
He's doing what you want from him. He's charismatic huckster. Trying to get the show together. The show must go on. He's your Kermit the Frog figure, yada yada yada.
We have Chelsea Peretti here as like kind of just like an assistant who's kind of like around delivering exposition. I was like, I feel like that was overcast. Like, again, not everything works. Letitia Wright is playing this like Lynx who helps teach Johnny how to dance. It's just, again, like I'm just like, okay, I think it's like overcasting. Eric Andre. I think he was okay. He plays like this yak.
He was
does
fine.
The duet. Cool. He's in it.
Right.
To me, it's like casting that is just for the trailer, so that you can be like boom, 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 like every celebrity's name, and you're just like,
right.
Whoa.
That is a very DreamWorks thing for sure. They definitely took that from the DreamWorks handbook.
But overall though, Will, we really set this up. I mean, Sing 2. What's your thought? Do you think this one is any better, any worse?
Yeah. Speaking of setup, I have to, I guess, acknowledge my history with Garth Jennings. It's very short.
He's your father.
No. I hope he's if he ever gets a chance to listen, I would like to thank him more officially. But in 2015, I went to New York City somewhat spontaneously, and I was there. I was going to move there. It didn't work out. I went to a couple of job interviews. The second to last day I was there, I was just kind of going around. I didn't make any plans because I did this kind of spontaneously, but I went by the Cherry Lane Theater and I saw that they were playing Oh Hello, the John Mulaney, Nick Kroll show. Nick Kroll's also in this film, as he is in the previous film. Being a 20-something-year-old guy, I was just like, I'll just go up to the box office and get a ticket. Obviously, that's not the way things work in New York City, especially for a hot show like Oh Hello. As I go up to the box office, I asked for a ticket. The lady's like, I'm sorry, we don't have tickets. I see a hand come down. A guy is like, hey, my friend didn't come, but I have an extra ticket. Would you want it? I get to the front row and I meet the guy, and I found out that guy is Garth Jennings.
No way.
That's a true story. I never told you a story.
No, you've always kept it close to your chest, waiting for just the right time.
So he spontaneously gave me front row tickets to Oh Hello off Broadway. So.
I have always wondered, because you have those photos of like you and John Mulaney and Nick Kroll, and I always knew there was a story there, but I was like, Will's not going to give that up easy.
So I don't know. I think it's a pretty fun story.
Very cool.
Anyway,
what year was this?
That was 2015. That was a year before Sing 1 came out. Yeah. So all that to say, I'm very affectionate towards Garth Jennings, but he also made a lot of films I like a lot. I like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah,
I like
same.
Son of Rambo.
Yeah.
I really like his music video work. He did a couple music videos for REM, my favorite band. He's done a few others. I feel like he kind of gets overshadowed compared to some of his contemporaries like Spike Jonze. Who kind of did some similar work, or like Michel
Spike
Gondry.
Jonze has an uncredited cameo in this movie, or an uncredited voice role.
Oh, yeah? I know they're friends. But yeah, I mean, I think he hasn't had the same success as like a Michel Gondry or a Spike Jonze, but I think like I said before, I think he's a pretty sincere filmmaker, and I think he puts a lot of heart into his films. I think even though they only kind of live up to like B level, I think he makes pretty nice, well-meaning films, and I think certainly the Sing movies are no exception. I think similar to the first movie, it's not super memorable, and it doesn't really stand out compared to some of its peers, as far as like being, like you said, not quite as inventive as Utopia, not really having the same like thematic depth as something like a Pixar film or even some of the better DreamWorks films. But I think compared to some of Illumination's previous films, I think there's more here to value. It doesn't feel quite as cold or cynical. I don't love the animation style of these films, but I think this movie feels a lot more cinematic in its presentation. It looks like Garth Jennings was a lot more interested in making this movie feel more epic and grand, and I think he pulls it off pretty well. I think I also like the expanding scope. I like that we get more time with the characters. I don't think it balances those characters always particularly well, and I think it's maybe a little bit too long for its own good. True. I admire the ambition here, and I don't think it's like an amazing movie or anything, but I had a decent time with it, but maybe I'm just a little biased. I don't know.
I did things I liked. I liked that they take us to a new place that kind of feels big, and they put a lot of effort into making it feel big. I think that whole aspect of like Red Shore City, I think it's a weird name, but in terms of just sort of being like, hey, like let's take these characters you already know and put them in a totally new environment. I think it's more successful too at like making this place feel very unique and distinct, because I think in the last movie, it was more of a forgettable thing, the location, not so in this. And then also we were chatting about this. I like that the villain gets to be a villain. Like the villain actually does despicable, horrible things, and it's not like glossed over or like wishy-washy, or it's like, well, the villain has to be sympathetic, or we can't have any villain because it's that's how movies are made these days. That has been something that's been not bugging me a ton, but bugging me a little bit with some animated movies that are just like we get it. Like you don't have to have a villain. Like Toy Story proved in 1995, you can have a great movie without like a very pronounced villain. You can have like an antagonist like Sid, right? But I think that these movies, like animated movies in general, are starting to overcorrect a little bit with that. Maybe like I think in Encanto at times people are kind of like, I kind of wish there was a villain here. Maybe like, I don't know if I would agree with that myself, but like Luca is kind of like that. You just kind of have like a bully character. So it's a nice change of pace is all I'm saying. It's like, well, we still can have this movie where like you have a pretty terrible villain that you can sort of, follow the movie and just be like, man, he's bad. He's good at being bad.
Right. Yeah, I get what you mean, because it's not like there's that scene where it's just like, you'll understand, and we get a flashback as him as a little cub or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, I couldn't be in the singing competition. They let him be on stage and he gets to sing a monologue whatever. There's none of that. He's just a really bad guy and he attempts murder. So it's like, that's... It's not like he's Scar, but he's like...
What's Garth Jennings trying to say here? I was wondering. I was like,
let's put it this way. I told you this already. I did look up to see if Scott Rudin was a producer on Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So far as I know, he wasn't involved.
He's not,
but
no.
I did wonder if Scott Rudin was the main influence for this character.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Scott Rudin, it's been an open secret for years, but even more so this year, people have come out and been like, he's a very well-known Hollywood producer, and people have been like, this guy's toxic. This guy is like
the
worst of the worst. And what?
He did a lot of stage productions, like Broadway stuff as well. He's like he's one of the few EGOTs.
Right. And yeah, he's just sort of like somebody that you do not want to mess with in Hollywood. And so like, I think you certainly were not alone in thinking this got written when watching this movie, to be totally clear. Although, I mean, the timing of it, yeah, it's hard to say. Like, was that really intentional? I kind of think it was, but I'm a bit of a conspiracy nut, me. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel like it's like Harvey Weinstein. So like, I mean, right. Yeah, I don't know who else it could. I mean, there are several, maybe less notable, but clearly influential producers that it could have been inspired from. I don't think it's any one person, but Scott Rudin was certainly the one that came to mind the most. Sure, yeah. Exactly, yeah. Yeah.
Now we haven't talked about the music in a movie called Sing 2. Let's talk about the music. I think the music is horrific. I think it's horrible. Like, if there's one thing about this movie I do not like, and I think is just painful most of the time, not every single, like, of course not every single, but I think by and large, when people started singing or when a song started coming on, I was like, please God, let it stop. I do not like how they do music in both of these movies. I think in the first movie is much better. Like, I don't know, there's a little bit more heart to it half the time, and this I'm just like, like, it's just cringe to me, and I'm not saying it's gonna be cringe for everybody. Like, I think like it's kind of got the big pop music appeal. Some people be like, I know that song. For me, it's just like, oh, not that song again. So I gotta say that when it comes to the music, I'm out. No thanks.
I didn't mind the music. I think it's well produced. I think the music kind of saves both movies, like, because they just
really?
I think both movies come together because of the music, but at the same time, to your credit, I think it's annoying that they don't have more original music. Like, it's just a lot of like karaoke, top 40 songs, or like, like retro 80s, 90s favorites. Like, I think that's kind of annoying. And I wish,
sorry to interrupt, but I just remembered Pharrell does sing in this movie. I was kind of saying that earlier. I totally forgot he sings. Yeah. I forgot that it's because it's not really him, but it is. But anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I got you. Yeah. Yeah, for me, it just, especially because like they had the opportunity with this movie with the fake show, or not fake in the movie, but like fake in real life, Out of This World, whatever the stage epic fantasy. Though, did you think a lot about the what was the name of the show in Tick Tick Boom? Like the show within the show.
The show within the show. Superbia.
Yeah, Superbia. Did you kind of think this was like?
No, I didn't really. Well, I think I watched Tick Tick Boom after I saw Sing 2. I saw Sing 2 a while ago. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. It just was like, I kind of feel like this show is if like Superbia actually got made.
That's kind of funny. I didn't make that connection before.
But no, I agree. Like, because like you have like this opportunity with Out of This World to be like, here are some original songs that we can do, and you can sell the track this way or whatever. But they're all just like covers,
songs, though, because they had other. It was covers. Yeah. Oh,
that's what I'm
saying. What you're saying.
My point is that they only really do covers. I feel like they should be doing original songs.
Well, isn't the Clay Holloway song an original?
It's still what I haven't found what I'm looking for. Was
that
a YouTube song?
Am I thinking of something else? I thought that there was one song they did.
They might.
Okay.
I just feel like if that's the case, they're very few and far between that there are original songs in this movie.
I think there may only be like one or two, because I'm looking at the track list now. I'm like, oh yeah, these are all covers. I just didn't know them as well. But hey, on that note, I do think that I still haven't found what I'm looking for is a really good. Like, that actually is really good. Like, one of the few times in the movie where I was like, okay, I'm clicking with this thing. There are other songs, like there's an Ariana Grande song in this. I'm just like, okay, here we go. There was that Bad Guy that they do in this, which I thought was like the one time I think I've heard that song in a movie where I'm like, this kind of fits. Like, I didn't hate that.
Did you not see Brightburn?
No. Is it?
Brightburn uses it pretty funnily.
Brightburn uses Bad Guy?
Yeah, it's
the movie
funny.
About an evil Superman child? Okay, I don't
want to give away in what context, but the way they use it is pretty funny.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah. And then I'm kind of looking at the rest here. I kind of appreciated that Halsey did a cover of the Strut song Could Have Been Me, and it's actually pretty like rocking. I kind of was into that. Other than that, I did not like any of the other music. Just me.
I mean, I don't love the music. I I guess I don't have
your favorite soundtrack of 2021.
No, but I mean, like, this is such an overstuffed year for musicals, and I guess Sing 2 technically counts as one. But like when I think back, I'm like, this isn't really like a musical, even though they sing like every other 5 minutes because they're all covers. Like it, and then it is a jukebox musical, which I'm not particularly fond of, but as a genre. But at the same time, I don't think any of the songs are done poorly or anything like that.
Okay. Well, I think I've said my piece on Sing 2. I think that this is pretty straightforward. It's fun for the kids. It's got its expected flaws, but I don't think it's egregiously bad anything, and it has a few nice surprises. So
sure.
That's what this movie is. There you go. I said in my Letterboxd review, which actually kind of took off. A lot of people seem to like it. I said,
I went back and I saw it got like a lot of likes. I was like, wow. Did.
Well, it's because I said this is the most James Corden movie that doesn't have James Corden in it.
That's a fair point.
I stand by it.
Good point. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's just kind of hard not to be annoyed by Illumination as a company at this point. I'm kind of in the same camp with them as I am with Marvel, where it's like the movies themselves I'm not particularly mad about because they're just like they're kind of fodder for kids. Like they're not great, but they're not terrible. Like the Minion stuff, I hate in principle, I hate the Minions as like
same, but they're harmless.
Like when you see the Minions, like when I see them on screen, I'm like, yeah, the Minions are kind of cute. Like they're like it's amusing. But I hate that they're like a brand now. Like they are like the cornerstone of CGI animation as a genre right now. But like when I see the Minions on screen here, like I see the trailer for the new Minions, or I see them in the Illumination logo, I'm like, yeah, Minions are cute. And I feel like that's my relationship with every Illumination movie except for like Despicable Me 3 and The Lorax and The Grinch. I'm just like, most of the time, I'm just like, yeah, this is cute. This is nice. I don't like that this is like the highest grossing animated film of 2021, but like I don't know if it's that high, but it's like up there, right? Like it did better than Raya and the Last Dragon and Encanto and stuff, right?
It's demolishing Encanto and Raya and the Last Dragon.
Which is kind of depressing.
Didn't even get a theatrical release, but this did. Okay, sure.
I mean, granted, like, yeah, that's a big one. Like I think this is actually, I like this more than Raya and the Last Dragon, but like the fact that a movie like this is doing better financially than an original high concept animated film like that is pretty depressing. But at the same time, when I watch it, I'm like, yeah, that's cute. That's nice. I'm not having a bad time watching this. And I feel like that was my relationship with the first movie, and that's my relationship with the next one, or this new one. But at the same time, a week from today, I'm not going to be thinking about this movie that much.
I think there are only 2 Illumination movies I like. I don't love any of them.
I don't love any. Like,
I think, you kind of heard about. I think Lorax is an abomination. I really hate that one. The 2 that I like are probably the first 2, Despicable Me and Hop.
Like,
I like those 2 movies.
Oh, Hop! I forgot about Hop. Hop is pretty bad, in my opinion.
You thought Hop was bad?
I thought Hop was bad.
I had a good time with Hop. I was hopping and rolling with that one.
I like the first Despicable Me, I think, is fine, and I like the second one kind of.
Yeah,
I think the second one's probably the best of the 3.
I disagree there, but I do like. I fell asleep during Despicable Me too. The Grinch, I almost liked. I was so close to really liking that one.
That
but
movie,
it was so close.
The Grinch is just like, is it better than the Jim Carrey one? I guess, but like I constantly forget that came out, and that made like $1 billion, and it's just like I forget that was a thing.
Kind of funny in retrospect, but yeah, it's just, you know what, look, if Illumination's your thing, if you're like, look, I show up for Illumination, that's my studio, power to you. I think that it is a certain type of movie that I just don't click with myself, but it's not that I don't think anybody it's wrong to like these movies or to like the Minions. Have fun. I think it is. If there's one thing that they've managed to package pretty well, is it's bringing joy to people. It's making people happy. Right. So I am glad that is the case.
They literally have a song that got nominated for an Oscar called "Happy," which is like, I feel like
earworm
that song.
Of our time.
That song is like, that just kind of describes Illumination as a brand, though. It's just like not a great song, but it's like catchy. If it's on the radio, I'll listen to it and I'll like bob my head. And then afterwards,
I'll switch the station. But you will? That's just me.
But I feel like that's like this kind of sums up like every Illumination movie, or like 3 out of 4 Illumination movies, where just like they're not great. Like I won't really defend them artistically, but when I watch them, like, yeah, this is fine.
I did see Pharrell perform live once, and he did do "Happy," and I didn't leave, so I guess that would have been that credit.
It would have been funny if you had that story, but it was just like, and then he introduced me to Nick Kroll and John Mulaney.
Yeah, he was like, hey, I got an extra ticket for Secret Life of Pets 2.
Right. Yeah.
You want in on this?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's Sing 2. Let's play the Rotten Tomatoes game. 95 reviews have been counted. Not a lot. This movie's been out for a week, and critics are being like, I think we're good. Like, okay. But only 95 critics. So what do you think, though, the tomato meter, the critic score is at this point?
This could be anywhere at this point. I don't honestly know. 76%.
Yeah, I know you're going to have an instant reaction to this. I'm going to preempt it. You're going to think this is very nice. 69%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I thought you were going to say like 96% or something. Like, what?
Which it's not far off from the first Sing. The first Sing has a 71%. Now, what do you think the audience score is, though? Audience score, we got 2,500 plus verified ratings. Critics are being like, we didn't watch it. Audiences are being like, we saw it twice.
Sure. I will say, I think overall, Sing 2 is better than Sing 1. I don't know if I mentioned that in our actual review. But as far as the audience score, I think they're going to be high. I think they're going to be like 86%.
98%.
Wow, they are high.
That's pretty wild. What about cinema score, though? Now we got to take the folks in Vegas.
This one, I have to apologize because I actually know this one.
You know it's an A+.
And I didn't cheat. Let me be clear.
Yeah.
I didn't cheat. This is all because of Instagram. I went on Instagram and I was scrolling through the feeds. I got an ad for Sing 2 and it said A+ cinema score. And it's like, I couldn't like swipe away to avoid it. So
it's okay.
I was spoiled.
I understand. Well, when you have an A+ cinema score, you got to expect the advertising is going to catch up.
Sure. Well, I'm just saying I knew that one in advance. That would have been a fun one to discover on the podcast, but unfortunately I knew it.
Yeah, it's the rare A+. We were just talking on the show about like how rare that is, and there have been a couple. We got an A+ recently, right? With was Spider-Man: No Way Home the A+? We were just talking about.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. So there you go.
I don't think it was Matrix Resurrections, even though I like that film quite a bit more.
So close.
Yeah.
All right, let's finish out the show with our last film of the week, and that is The Lost Daughter. Now, The Lost Daughter, I kind of already mentioned this at the top of the show, saying how it hit limited release earlier this month, and I managed to catch a screener of it, but it's still pretty fresh in my mind. But it's now streaming on Netflix, so great time to talk about it, and more people can check it out. This is a new film written and directed for the first time by Maggie Gyllenhaal, her feature debut, and it's based on the novel by Elena Ferrante, who I actually have the novel over on my desk there. And it's like a psychological drama about motherhood, kind of like an uncomfortable meditation on really like what the types of mothers who are just like, I don't want to be a mother, but I am one. It's that kind of story. It stars Olivia Colman, Dakota Johnson, Jessie Buckley. I should say Olivia Colman is really the main character here, and we follow her while she's on a vacation in Greece, and she kind of like sees herself, like her younger self, through this other person there who's with their daughter, who is just like having a really rough time. And she's, of course, played by Dakota Johnson. And we see flashbacks of Olivia Colman's own life and how she handled, the perils of motherhood, played by Jessie Buckley. We also have Paul Mescal in this movie, who we recognize from Normal People, which is a very important series to me in general. Also, Peter Sarsgaard is in this, and the wonderful Ed Harris, who shows up in this and has a pretty sizable role. Now, Olivia Colman also serves as an executive producer. This is definitely an awards favorite in some circles. It premiered, I think, at Venice. And I think it's one of Netflix's big plays for a couple of nominations, at least in the acting and possibly adapted screenplay. And we should, of course, say the screenplay, I did say it was written and directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal. She also did the screenplay. And I think first off the bat, I got to say, Maggie Gyllenhaal, wow. Fantastic debut from her. Whether or not people like the film, and I don't think everybody's loving this movie, I think that this is a really strong start for her directing career and her screenplay career. I don't think she's getting enough credit for her screenwriting bona fides, although she did win an award already for best screenplay through Venice, if I'm not mistaken. So that said, Will Ashton, Lost Daughter, what do you think of this movie? You like it?
Good film. I'm going to say that off the top. And I agree that because I think this movie it's not particularly flashy in terms of its visuals. I think it's very precise, like the way that like the movie comes together, especially as an adaptation. I think it's easy for folks, especially because it's on Netflix, which I think is probably it's good in terms of getting it eyeballs, but I don't think this is probably the right way to distribute the film. This is like the type of film you need to watch, I feel like, at an art house with like 5 other people spread out on like a Tuesday or like a Sunday afternoon or something like that, Sunday matinee. Like you can really like kind of fully devote your attention to it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah,
it feels like a weird movie.
I can picture myself in that theater eating it's that day when the popcorn is just right. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm there.
Right. It just reminds me of the movies I would see at my college art house theater, like a Saturday at like 2:45, and like nobody's talking to each other. There are like 4 other people in the theater, and then you go to the bathroom afterwards, and like some guy next to you in the urinal is like, "Pretty good movie, right?" And it's like, I guess
we don't talk in here.
Yeah. Not I guess because I didn't like the movie, more just like I don't know who this man is. Why are you talking to me? I've had that experience a few times, if you can't infer. But
last time I had that experience, I think, was for the Hateful Eight during the intermission. Really? Yeah.
What did they say?
They were just like, "Wow, what's going to happen next?" And I'm like,
"Oh, really?
We don't talk in here."
Okay, yeah, that's word of advice, because I know we have younger listeners. Don't spark up movie conversations in the bathroom with strangers.
Not a good idea.
Your intentions may not be bad, but it's not the time nor place. But yeah, no, I think like you said before, like I think there is something very specific about the way she films this movie. It's not, like I said, a particularly showy film, but like even like though it's very picturesque, there is something like this underlying current of terror that doesn't feel overstated, but it's like constantly fueling the film throughout. And I think a lot of that comes from really smart editing choices, but I also think it's just her as a filmmaker, one that's pretty adept, like you said, coming into this early on. It just feels like she knows exactly what she wants to say with this text. She's not making like very like flashy choices, but all those choices feel very in sync with what she's saying, and it's a really impressive debut.
Yeah, I think what's key to this debut, it's not just the technicals. Obviously, the technicals are impressive in their own right. I think what impresses me the most is that she's not flinching with this subject matter, which I think is what makes or break this novel, making it as an adaptation, because this sparks really uncomfortable dialogue about a type of person who sees the downfall of motherhood and kind of just wants to shun it. And it kind of humanizes and sympathizes a point of view that movies just don't usually talk about or don't usually get into, especially not at this scale. Like we get something, maybe like a French film here or there, will have something like a character like this as the protagonist. But yeah, I mean, Olivia Colman in this, she's not like likable. Like she's mean. She's a bit of a brat. And at the same time, I love her.
She's complex.
Yeah. Like she's rude to people, but she kind of like catches herself and then tries to adjust. And she has a hard time being fake. You know, she has a hard time with like niceties, and she does like terrible things for no good reason. And like, I think the fascination behind this movie is getting to know her and understanding her, or trying to. And I think when we get to the end of the movie, that is really what makes this movie kind of like stick out to me, is how it's able to bring a character like her to life in kind of a profound way, like a way that I wasn't expecting. And yeah, I think in terms of like characterization, this is the kind of movie that like has my number.
Yeah, I mean, I heard that complaint going into it that her character is unlikable. And for one, I think anyone who is just dismissing a movie because the character is unlikable is, I think they're kind of showing their ass a little bit, because like how many movies have we gotten with unlikable male characters that get praised, rightly or wrongly? Right. And I feel like there's this kind of this hypocrisy where it's just like, oh, because we get an unlikable female character. Not saying that's the case for everyone that dislikes the movie, but I think it is for some. So felt like it was worth saying. But at the same time, I guess because I was so often told that her character is unlikable, that I guess I was expecting her character to be more unlikable, and I felt like the Jessie Buckley character is more unlikable than the Olivia Colman one. Like I feel like we said, she's kind of just more like standoffish, and like she does kind of some impulsively selfish things, but it's not like she's like,
I don't know though. She's doing like an extended deception. For a child, thing, yeah. That is right, like,
that's a bit,
that is like, it's really hard to sort of be like, I like this guy. You know what I'm saying?
No,
like,
no, but I get what you mean. Well, that, I mean, yeah, as we find out about that going, but I mean, like early on, where it's just like,
yeah, sure, early
these strangers are coming up. It's like,
yeah.
Hey, can you like move? It's like, I don't know you. Like, why would I
that
want
part
to move?
I was just like, you go. Like,
right,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah, like, that's what I'm talking about. More like stuff like that. But yeah, I think Olivia Colman is, as expected, really good in this movie. And I think what I really like about Maggie Gyllenhaal's direction is that obviously she knows as an actress herself how to really highlight her performance. Like Olivia Colman is an actress who can be broad and theatrical in certain roles, but I think there's a chilliness here that I think is kind of hard to communicate. If you have a director that doesn't showcase that well, this performance can seem too understated. And I think she's good about allowing Olivia Colman to feel very reserved and in the I'm not exactly sure what word I was looking for, but like kind of reserved and chilly, but like you can understand her impulsively, even if you don't understand exactly what's going on in her mind. You can kind of sympathize with where she's standing and understand her as a character. And I think that's something that, as we've been mentioning already, for a first time filmmaker to communicate that visually really well is something that I find really impressive.
I think the word that I was gravitating toward for her character was there's something unsettling about this person. And for most of the movie, it's hard to pinpoint why am I so unsettled by this? And it's a movie that examines that reaction. It's about that. And it's sort of being like, we put all of these expectations and all of these preconceptions of like what a mother is into people. Like people tell us like I have 2 kids and you immediately make assumptions about them. And I think this is a movie sort of like poking at like human beings are so much more complex than the labels and the sort of archetypes that we create for people. I think that's why it's such a killer debut for me, because for a first time filmmaker and like you said, an actor, to really get to the root of something like that in a way that by all intents that I can tell is pretty true to the novel. I haven't read the whole thing, but certainly is like capturing the spirit of that novel and like what it's trying to investigate. Yeah, I think that this movie really lands. Now, is it a movie that I think is going to like rattle your bones and, invigorate, your thirst for cinema? Not necessarily. I think that it's a really fun thinking movie that maybe fun isn't the right word, but I think it's one that I went through really interested the entire time. And I certainly got a few things out of it. Not to say that it's for sure the most entertaining and amusing film you can watch, but not that it's trying to be.
Right. Well, that's why, I know Power of the Dog is doing well in there, so I don't want to assume that like Netflix users have like kind of restless fingers, but I do feel like this is the type of movie that probably is best benefited by like wrestling with it in the theater if you could. Like, certainly like if you were to kind of like sit with it and like kind of stew with it a little bit more. I worry with something like Netflix where, you have the remote next to you and you're kind of dealing with a character who's a bit inscrutable and, not always someone you can sympathize or relate to. You can, kind of flip the channel and put on Cobra Kai. And I think
I just watched 4th season of Cobra Kai and it rules. So
I'm not dismissing Cobra Kai. I'm just saying that like I think that temptation can come about a little bit easier on Netflix. So I mean, I'm glad they distributed. I'm glad we're getting movies like this, but I also worry with a studio like or a distributor like Netflix if this is the type of movie that best suits their service. But at the same time, like I said, I'd much rather they have it and release it than the other way around. But yeah,
I do want to mention that I said that it's not that amusing. It has amusing moments, though.
Oh, it's pretty darkly funny in certain moments.
Yes, very darkly funny.
Dryly funny, yeah.
Ed Harris dances in this movie. Olivia Colman dances in this movie. And I really dug this Jessie Buckley performance. It's really good. I think what's good about it to me the most is that she and Olivia Colman look nothing alike. But for some reason, I bought that they're the same person. Like, no, I don't know how they did that. Like,
because Because when I heard about the movie, I didn't know much about the plot. I was under the assumption that Jessie Buckley was playing her daughter. So when I saw she was going to be her in the flashback scenes, I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of a like I said, physically, I don't quite see the two. I mean, obviously, Jessie Buckley, I think, is taller than Olivia Colman, a few other differences. But yeah, I think I agree with you that like it was a performance. I was like, I kind of had to sit with it as well. But I think ultimately, and it's it's kind of hard to follow Olivia Colman, to be fair. But I think Jessie Buckley is obviously quite a standout actress. She continues to impress in a lot of things, including last year's You Were Never Really Here. But
I'm thinking
I'm thinking of anything. Sorry. But I think she's really doing some outstanding stuff, and certainly this is no exception.
Yeah, Jessie Buckley, one of our finest young actors today. I think that Dakota Johnson is quite good in this as well. Another one of our wonderful, like new generation on the block kind of actor, but kind of like mixing it up with some older proven actors, as we see in this with Ed Harris and Olivia Colman and more. Now, I got a question for you, Will. It's a tough question. It's one that maybe is a little bit more open-ended than I'm about to make it sound, but who is the lost daughter? Is it Olivia Colman? Is it all of us?
Sure.
Is it Maggie Gyllenhaal?
Yeah, I mean, without giving too much away about the plot, I do kind of like that there is that sort of ripple effect to it. Like we're seeing like kind of like three different generations of motherhood. One, like who obviously is like follow like Olivia Colman's character, has a lot of regrets about how she handled her motherhood. We have Dakota Johnson, just a newfound mother and having some of the feelings that a lot of mothers have, but maybe don't feel comfortable vocalizing. And then we have another woman, I can't think of the actress's name, but like she is, coming into motherhood a little bit late, but she kind of has her opinions already about what motherhood should be, and doesn't quite feel comfortable with Olivia Colman's general disposition. It's a movie. I mean, it feels weird that we're like two guys kind of talking about this movie, because it's such a woman-centric film, and I imagine there's a lot of great reviews that discuss these things a little bit more in depth and a little bit more thoughtfully. But I think this is the type of movie that I really like kind of chewing with and sitting with, and I don't know if it's quite going to hit my like best of the year list, but it's a type of movie I'm really thankful that we're getting still.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that if there was one studio note I would put in, it's like call The Lost Daughters, right? But no, in a more serious note, one of my favorite lines from this movie, and kind of what you're talking about, of like, we're two guys. We can't relate directly to this, but I do think it is pretty telling that we can get so much out of it just as like two outsiders, right, to this kind of story. And, I think there are a lot of guys who will watch this movie and might be confused. They won't know what to make of it. And that comes down to a line in this movie, I think it was like, somebody says, "I'm an unnatural mother." And I think where the guys kind of fit into this story is that like, a lot of those expectations, a lot of those like demands that are made of mothers can be rooted from not just other women, which this movie talks about, but also other men, or men in general, who are just sort of like, you're supposed to do this because you're the mother. You have this responsibility and this and this and this. And what I like about this movie is that it's daring, it's brave enough to say like, there is a person who feels this way and, shouldn't be judged for it. And even if you do judge her, I just think this is a movie that's pretty good about, dissecting that judgment in a thoughtful way that hopefully can bring some catharsis to people watching and being like, I've always felt like that. I could see people watching this. I've met people who are just sort of like, I could never see myself having kids. Like, it isn't just like a momentary thing. It's just something I'm, starkly opposed to. And I like the idea of them being able to watch a movie like this and being like, you know what, I'm not alone. Like, and I maybe they always knew they weren't alone, but it's nice when a movie sort of validates that feeling that usually is being called unnatural. And so like, if a movie can do that, particularly one on Netflix, I think that's really great. I think that's really a really good thing that can help people process some really tough stuff. So, not to say that, everybody who's going to get something out of it is going to be that kind of person, but I do think that it's certainly instructive in a lot of ways, having compassion and empathy for people who see the world differently and, have the right to do so.
Yeah, I mean, I generally find it really impressive that this is a American film, because it does, like I think you mentioned earlier, have a sort of European feel to it, not only in terms of the location that it's filmed in, but just the general aesthetics and the way that it approaches these kind of inscrutable subject matters. And,
the author is Italian of the subject matter. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. I just meant from the film production standpoint.
Sure.
Is she involved with the film? I don't know. Actually.
I don't think so. She's not a producer.
Okay. Well, obviously, I know, like you said, Maggie Gyllenhaal adapted the screenplay, but I didn't know she, like you said, produced the film.
Right.
But yeah, we also, just like obviously like in America, we're kind of in this like, and not to get like too into it, but we're kind of in this weird time where like I think people have certain expectations for women and what women's roles in societies should be in terms of like their anatomy and gender and then their like motherhood and stuff like that. And I think having a film like this is so refreshing because, like you said, it asks a lot of tough, difficult questions and it gives you a lot to chew on, but it doesn't give any particularly easy answers about it either. And yeah, it's a really impressive film in that regard.
We finally agree on a film this week. I mean, I guess we kind of agreed on Sing too. I guess.
Sure.
Sort of. I don't know. We agreed more than we didn't. We'll say that.
We went from Sing 2 to singing the praises of
there you go.
Lost
we had some
Daughter.
praises to sing for this one. I want to say, I don't think Paul Mescal is, particularly utilized well here. Like, I think he's good in the movie as Will. It's kind of like,
Will.
Roundabout kind of guy. He's perfectly nice in this, but if people aren't familiar, he is killer in the show Normal People. It's a limited series that was on Hulu last year.
Oh, that's where he's from.
Yes, and he is wonderful in that show. I was excited to see him in this, but I just didn't get like that full Paul Mescal experience. But certainly good in this movie.
I was, because they introduced him fairly early on, and you're like, I wonder if he's going to play a bigger role later in the film. Yeah. And not really.
Yeah.
But
he's more of a plot device than anything else.
Since we're talking about the men in the movie, I will say Ed Harris. So wonderful to see him again. He's fantastic in this. And Maggie Gyllenhaal's husband, Pierce Sarsgaard, is in the film. And he shows up kind of like midway through the movie, and I was kind of like, is this just going to be a cameo because of the relation? But no, he gets a few interesting scenes. And I like that. Like, I don't know. I mean, I feel like Hollywood never really knew what to do with Pierce Sarsgaard. I feel bad for the guy. I mean, he's probably very rich. Like, they always kind of got cast into these like sort of villainous roles, but I feel like there's always sort of a sensuality to him that's like kind of hard to put your finger on. Like, there's a couple movies that deal with it, like Kingsley. I remember talking.
Boys Don't Cry.
Boys Don't Cry. That's a good example, I guess. I haven't seen Boys Don't Cry, so I don't want to speak out of turn with that.
Oh,
film.
You should. It's quite good. My favorite movie with him, though, where he's not, of course, he's not like really a villain in a traditional way, is probably in Education. Which that's a good in Education, good example. I think that like in that movie it's just like the depth of his acting is just so it's endless in that kind of movie. But then you get him in something like Magnificent Seven, where you're just like, okay. But
I mean, as we were, I guess, sort of alluding to, like the female lens, I guess, in this movie, like the way that she's able to look at Pierce Sarsgaard in a way that's like, very sexual, in a way that I don't think we typically get in American films like this. It's refreshing to see. You don't really get that perspective, I guess, a lot in films like this. Yeah.
Agreed. Well, it's now playing on Netflix, and I think it's still playing in some theaters. So it sounds like we both recommend The Lost Daughter. Rotten Tomatoes game. Okay, well, Ashton, 163 reviews have been counted. One of them's mine, and so that gives you at least a little bit of a clue, right?
Were you positive on the film?
I was positive on. Yeah, I was quite positive on the film. It's in.
I just want to make sure. I didn't know if your opinion changed, if you were more favorable with time.
You think I'm just like a fair weather? I'm just like going back and forth because you looked at my yearly rankings and you were
I looked at your yearly ranking and you're like all over the place now. I don't know what to think of John Negroni, Film the Critic. Now.
I've been updating it all year. It's not like, but anyway, 163 reviews have been counted for The Lost Daughter. What do you think the critic score is right now on Rotten Tomatoes?
89%.
96%.
Wow. Okay. Good for Lost Daughter. Yeah.
I think it perked up a little bit too, because I think it was a little bit lower and then it kind of went up. I think it, because like when I was watching it at that point, I didn't really know if it was going to be like a darling for critics. It seemed like it could go either way. I was kind of hearing from some people who had seen it from Venice being like, it's okay. And then some people being like, it's good. But yeah, some of the effusive praise is starting to happen now, I think. I
feel like it's more of a critics circle favorite than a award season favorite. But I can certainly see why the Netflix put in their like Oscar contender roundup.
Yeah, it is amazing how The Favorite just sort of rocketed Olivia Colman to this level. Like that was a movie people were not expecting her to win Best Actress for, and since then I think that her career is just like
The Father,
this and The Father. Yeah, I mean. She is certainly now like one of our top tier, actors working right now. What about the audience score? We have 250 plus ratings. Not a lot of ratings for a Netflix movie, but what do you think? What do you think audiences are saying about this one? What do you think?
I'm gonna say 72%.
Oh man, 43%.
Oof.
43. And there was
I knew there were going to be more.
There was a tweet thing, a controversy yesterday, where there were some people, a debacle, a bit of a discourse, where there were a couple of people who are horrible, like if film Twitter's worst, who are just sort of like, this is the disconnect between critics and fans. and people were just like, please stop talking. Like, that was kind of the gist. They were like, I haven't seen a divide this steep. Critics are so out of touch. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I hate this.
Oh, those folks. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I thought you were talking like critics being like, see, like, why can't audiences appreciate this movie?
No, other
something?
direction.
You're saying it's backwards. Like, critics should be like more critical of this film because the audiences are quote unquote saying it how it is.
Yeah, 250 plus ratings, like almost the same amount of critics, and they're not even verified ratings. So yeah.
Well, I mean, do you think it's because it centers around a, as we mentioned, unlikable female?
Because it's a tough watch.
Character?
It's not a traditionally like, that's the thing that bugs me when people are like, there's a divide between critics and fans. Usually when that's the case, it's because it's a tougher film. It's a more challenging film, and that's kind of to be expected. It's like people are like, well, yeah, but there's no divide like between like Spider-Man No Way Home. It's like, yeah, because that's not as challenging a film. Like it's pretty like easy to evaluate the quality of that one.
There's a reason I think this movie didn't get dropped on Christmas Eve the same way Don't Look Up does. And it's funny to think that like Don't Look Up is considered more accessible to a wider audience than The Lost Daughter, but at
because
the same time,
it makes people feel good about themselves of like, I have the right opinion
about the world ending.
No, I think like people watch the movie and get self-righteous.
Oh,
and,
of course,
like,
yeah, morally superior.
Morally superior. There's like a bit of like I can bring on this righteous indignation because I see these people who don't like the movie, and that makes me want to target them and just be like, you don't like this movie, you don't like this movie's message, and it's just like, my gosh, are we in preschool? Like, okay,
all right,
this is why our average rating on Cinemaholics is going down.
Yeah,
I'm going a little bit too hard. Sorry.
Sure.
That's The Lost Daughter. We don't have a cinema score, if you can believe it, but we do have a letterboxed average, and we've been doing this a little bit more recently. We didn't do it for Tragedy of Macbeth and Sing 2, but let's do it for this one. What do you think the average letterbox rating is? You know, Letterboxd, of course, is a 5-point system.
3.4.
3.6. Not bad. Pretty close. Only 0.2 off. 3.6 out of 5. So yeah, most people are pretty much giving it like 3.5 stars. I think that's pretty in line. I think I'm around like a 3.5 star if I had to do it, which is quite good. Very good film. All right, well, that'll do it for this episode of Cinemaholics. We were glad to be here to talk with you about movies. Next week, we are going to be doing our top 10 films of 2021. That is our own personal top 10s. And then, our outliers, our favorite films of the year. We'll try to talk about just some, recurring trends that happened this year in film and maybe get some of that stuff off our chest. And also hoping that for that episode, we can, maybe do like what's our consolidated list? What's the best Cinemaholics movie of the year according to the two of us? We'll see if that's the case. I've turned in my top 10, but I haven't seen yours, Will. So I'm excited to see what you have planned for me.
I have a few more that I'm trying to catch up on.
Same here. Mine could change.
And
yeah,
there are a few that I'm just accepting that I won't get to see. I don't think I'll be able to see Drive My Car. I don't think I'll be able to see Memoria. I don't think I'll be able to see. I can't think of them off the top of my head. There are a few others I knew. I was like, it's probably not going to happen in time, unfortunately. But
for me, the main one is Parallel Mothers. That's the one that I don't think there's any way for me to see that. Unfortunately.
Bad Luck Bang and Looney Porn. That was another one that was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to see this in time, unfortunately. But I have seen a lot of films I like, and quite a few I'm excited to discuss.
How many movies have you seen this year? I actually haven't asked you.
Like first views or in the year of 2020? I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
I know, but let me see my first view count. It was I'm running out of time. I'll finish up by saying I saw 380 films for the first time last year, not counting rewatches.
All right, sounds good.
I don't know how many of those are 2021. You can my letterbox is my letterbox is publicly available. You can count them yourself.
There you go. All right. Yeah. Well, that'll do it for this episode of Cinemaholics. From the Internet California, I am John Negroni.
And for the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Wes.
See you next time.